see Evolt's joined on the chat.
Where?
Hello. You well, Evolt?
Yeah. Jeez, like
We're gonna start soon. We're just getting pizza, you know, because you didn't want to come get pizza, so.
Kind of looks like a lot of people just sitting around doing nothing.
They're all getting, the rest are getting pizza.
Bunch of slackers.
Indeed.
Yeah, I'm gonna go get a beer.
Nice.
Good evening, everyone. Let's get started. All right, just like to welcome everyone here. Yeah, excited to be doing this meetup with the views, yeah, with a new group, the developers users group. I think it's nice to have you guys in person. We've been trying to host some of these meetups ever since COVID, and yeah, I'm sure we're going to be having a few more with you guys. And yeah, thanks for attending and coming here. I'll just quickly talk a little bit about Span. Just going to take a minute. Just to introduce Span, we're a technical strategy and software engineering company, and we offer consulting services as well as we have some of our own products. And yeah, our team is based in South Africa. We've got some colleagues in Mexico as well, and then our head office is in San Francisco, and where most of our clients kind of reside. Yeah, and I think I'll just talk like quickly what we do. Well, maybe talk about our kind of vision. It's pretty simple. It's about empowering teams to navigate change and craft tomorrow solutions. So in our industry, as we all know, not only constants change. So that's part of our vision. And then our mission is to tackle the client's biggest challenges head on and then turn those opportunities into innovative products. So we see a lot of clients, they have lots of problems. We learn from those and we try and build those back into like our own products that then we obviously try and sell and license to clients. So using the consulting side of the business to kind of inform the product and grow our products and improve. So sorry, I'm just getting a request here. Yeah, that's fine. That's one of our colleagues, Nick. That's fine. Okay, yeah, that's all I'm going to say. So I didn't introduce myself. My name is Chris Macrianis. I'm a director of technology at Span. And just some logistics. The bathrooms, they're outside our office. So as you go out, if you go left, it's the ladies' bathroom. And if you go right, it's the men's bathroom. So just keep that in mind. And yeah, please keep your phones on silent if they're not to interrupt anyone. And yeah, help yourselves to drinks and lots of pizzas here. And yeah, enjoy the talks. I'll hand over to Josh. He's going to introduce the speakers for tonight.
Cool. Thank you so much. Yeah, so I think my section is just to say thank you to everyone. So yeah, first off, obviously we're the developer user group. We tend to do meetups like this every month. We're kind of riding the coattails off of DevConf last week. If you don't know, we are affiliated with them. Robert and Candice are our founding members, so we do this during the rest of the year as well, while preparing for the next DevConf. Yeah, so ultimately, I just wanted to say thank you to Span for hosting us this time. We would love to do more. I've been pushing for us to do some more hybrid events. I don't think we'll ever quite get away from digital after COVID, because a lot of our people enjoy joining from the comfort of their own home. Yeah, and then another thing, we have 3 JetBrains prizes to give away. I'm gonna make that Chris and Phlippie's problem. So you guys can give the prizes away to whoever asks the best questions or whatever way you guys want to. So yeah, just thank you to them for sponsoring the prizes. And then yeah, obviously big thanks to Candice and Robert for continuing to support us with this. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it from my side. I'm gonna hand over now to David Campy from the I can never coder level up. Was that good enough? You can introduce it more properly. It's going to talk a bit about them.
Cool, thanks, Josh. Just mic check at the back. Yeah, always technology and plugging in is fun. So Coder Level Up. Specifically, what I'm here for tonight is to look for people who might like to help young people into coding. So young people aged 7 to 17 years old might be really cool to get into coding. Generally, a question I like to ask is, did anybody in the room learn to code before they were 17 or get into it? So it was pretty lucky for you to do that before you were 30. Anybody else? And then sort of the later starters. So the question is when we started, and we always had like a mentor or someone who helped unblock us. And really, we could be that person. I don't know if I can drop something into the chat, Josh. You can type coderlevelup.org/volunteers-needed. And I don't have slides or anything behind me, but if you look at that page, you will see that we actually have 92 code clubs here in the Western Cape at the moment. Those have been started by teachers or run at community centers, and they are all places where people like us can be very much at home to arrive and help out some young person stuck in their coding journey. We've got very cool pathways. So from, I don't know how to code, how do I get going into Scratch, into Python, into physical computing. I was hoping to plug something in, but I don't actually know how to get power up here, so I'm not going to waste time with that. Maybe I could try for power, just because LEDs are cool, and I wanted to show you this fun thing that we tend to play with. Can I plug? Yeah, I'm just looking for a USB-C. If this has somewhere that this could plug in, then that one at the end, it'll go in there. Okay. And then, did I hear a little person's voice? Hello, Faith. How old are you, Faith?
Hello. Yes, you heard my daughter. She wants to talk today.
Cool. How old is she?
2 years old.
2 years old. So at 2 years old, we can play with some more physical stuff than coding, Faith. But then by the time you're about 5 or 6, Dad can start to help you into coding. And if you plug that guy in, it makes a beautiful rainbow. And that's all I really want to show you. Now, maybe Faith can maybe see that. Where's the camera? There we go. And we come up with a rainbow. It looks like there we go. It looks like a real rainbow, and it has cool colors in it. And the cool thing about this little computer here is it's got a humidity sensor, it's got a tilt sensor, pan tilt, and everything else. And there are 2 of these on the International Space Station. And they were put there so young people can run their code in space. And like, that's one cool end goal of being part of a network of code clubs. So yes, I can teach my kids to code at home, but when I join a global network, then suddenly I've got a way to send their code to space, run their code on robots, do all that other stuff. So that link that Josh kindly put into the chat is all you need to find out how to volunteer. Sign up on the volunteering form and say, tell me more, or I'm ready to volunteer, or hey, I'm so keen, I want to start a club, or actually I'm already volunteering. and then we can get in touch. That's all I really wanted to use this space to say. Thank you very much for the time. And if anybody wants to find out more, I'm here eating pizza and stuff. Thank you, Josh.
Cool. Thank you so much. Clap, clap, clap. Do you want to just give that URL again to the people in person?
Go to Coder Level Up. If you go to coderlevelup.org, coderlevelup.org, which is maybe in the chat of the online event. That's all you need to do, because the second post down on there is volunteers needed. You can click on that link and you can go through. Since I got given the mic back, that's where you'll find out about code clubs and coder dojos. And those are supported by the Raspberry Pi Foundation through like online content and stuff. So we got a lot of cool content to play with. So good luck, have fun.
That's awesome. Thank you. Awesome. Cool. So our first speaker, next speaker, is Phlippie. He's going to be talking to us about how your language can help solve bugs. I think I got that right. So Phlippie and we worked together on a discovery project. Both contract houses kind of came together, and I think he's moved on to greener pastures or different pastures. So yeah, looking forward to hearing your talk.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm having technical issues again. I thought I could share Safari, but it seems like I can't. So I'm just creating some windows so I can have speaker notes. And there we go. Okay, let's hope I can share it now. Ah, this is so annoying.
Are you able to share?
I can only share my desktop, which is what I am going to do. There we go.
Cool.
Okay, I'm going to be on the first page, preferably. There we go. Cool. This talk, I can maybe close this window. There we go. Let me just see if this actually advances things. Yes. Okay. Great. Cool. We're cooking. Right. This talk is called "Saying What You Mean." So maybe let me start off by saying in South Africa, we don't say hello. We say "How's it, but."
Sorry, Phlippie. We're seeing your speaker notes.
You are. That is the worst. Why is this thing like this? It wouldn't do it before. Let's see what else I can do. My options are desktop. Now I can share my speaker view, which is maybe good, because then I can exit the speaker view and rather show it here.
That's working.
Okay. Let me just switch here. You still can't see my speaker view, right?
No.
Okay, perfect. Cool. Right. Okay. As I was saying, in South Africa, we say we don't say hello. We say "How's it, but," and I think that's beautiful. Just wanted to share that with you. Actually, I don't have this in my speaker notes, but speaking of DevConf, this is a talk that I did submit, and it didn't get accepted. So you guys get sloppy seconds. You're very welcome. This talk is called "Saying What You Mean." My hope is that by the end of it, you will think about language in a new way, and that you will see programming as an extension of that, and that you will have learned a few techniques that allow you to manipulate how you express ideas in code to write better software. Right. There we go. So I used to be an assistant lecturer at a university, and whenever I presented something, students' first question was always, can we get the slides? So I figured let's just get that out of the way first. There's a URL. You can take a picture or a screenshot if you want to follow along, review this later. There are some links in the slides as well that you may want to check out. So just your choice there. And for the curious, I made this with Reveal.js, which I'm now regretting because it's giving me a lot of technical issues. So a little bit about me. My name is Phlippie. That is my real name. I will not elaborate any further on that. For money, I work as a mobile developer at a cozy little software consultancy called Retro Rabbit. I have some stuff on the GitHub, and I blog sometimes, and I put my stuff on a site called Bear Blog, which is a lightweight blogging platform that's actually built by a South African guy called Herman Martinez. Really cool platform, which I would recommend you check out. Cool. So this talk, quick overview of the main points we'll hit here today. We're going to start with a background, which is just on language in general. Then I'm going to share with you an opinion, which is sort of the core message that I wanted to share. And then we'll take it a little bit more practical with programming. Right, so some background. It is pretty interesting to me that as software people, our main tool for doing our jobs is language. I mean, yes, programming languages, sure, but languages nonetheless. So I wanted to talk about language for a bit. I'm guessing with a bunch of nerds in the audience, there will be at least a few fans of Denis Villeneuve's sci-fi movie Arrival. So without spoiling anything, the movie goes into a concept called linguistic relativity, and even mentions by name Sapir and Worf, the two researchers to whom this idea is usually attributed. The hypothesis with this is basically that the language which you speak and which you understand to some degree determines or influences your thoughts and your worldview. That's quite an intuitive idea if you think about it, and there are lots of really interesting real-world examples here that seem to support it. For example, some languages such as Japanese allow you to drop pronouns. So instead of saying I went there, you can just say went there. And there seems to be a link between these languages where we literally just mention ourselves less frequently and a more collectivist, community-oriented culture. There's a language called Gugu Yimitir, which is spoken in North Queensland in Australia. This language doesn't have relative directions like left, right, so on, only absolute directions like north and south. So I would literally say, I am sitting towards the south of my desk if I spoke this language. Speakers of this language tends to always know where north is, even if they're indoors, even at night. And that's really, it's not a skill that most people have, right? It seems to come from the language. Then there's an experiment where researchers ran. They designed this experiment where speakers of English, Japanese, and Spanish watched videos of people breaking things, either by accident or on purpose. And then afterwards, they were asked to recall who broke what. Now, unlike English, in Japanese and Spanish, you don't use agentive language for accidents. So instead of saying John broke the vase, you will say the vase was broken. Now, after watching these videos, the speakers of these languages were still equally likely to remember who broke something on purpose. Like if John goes in with a baseball bat and smashes something, they'll remember that. But if John accidentally knocked something off the table, they will actually be less likely to remember that. So it seems like the language that you speak affects your memory. Another interesting example is in English, time is stuff, right? We talk about 2 days, 3 hours. Whereas in other languages such as Hopi, which is a Native American language, it is seen more as a cycle. Now in English, we tend to think of time as something that we can save or lose or waste or spend, right? Like how would we physically think about time if the words that we use were a little different? Then we can talk about color, even the color ignorant among us, and that's me, honestly. Even I tend to think of pink as its own color that's completely distinct from red, right? So is that just because it has a different name? Pink is a different word than red? Could be. Russian has different names for lighter and darker shades of blue, and it seems like they do consider those to be different colors in a way that we do not. Then in the novel 1984 by George Orwell, there's a totalitarian government suppressing a nation, and one of the tools they use is a new language, a fictional language called Newspeak. And in Newspeak, there is no word for rebellion or uprising or something like that. And the idea is that by not having a word for it, by depriving a whole nation of a word to associate with this, they hope to control the nation and prevent them from rebelling. Interesting concept. Okay. So here are some interesting quotes also. A guy called Wittgenstein said in German, the limits of my language mean the limits of my world. And another guy called Kravchenko has this long quote: "An existing impasse in the study of this relationship between language and mind cannot be overcome as long as the problem itself is not reformulated to rid it of the intrinsically dualistic assumption that there is, in fact, a phenomenon called language that is ontologically independent of the phenomenon called mind. Mind cannot be understood without and outside of language." Very interesting idea. A disclaimer: the strong version of the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, which is also known as linguistic determination, is that language determines thoughts. So, and this is pretty much universally rejected by linguists. So not having a word for something does not actually restrict us from thinking about it. Just as an example, if you've ever said, "I can't explain how I'm feeling," not having a word doesn't stop you from feeling a certain way, right? But there's a looser form of the hypothesis, which is what I mentioned, linguistic relativity, that seems to be more accepted, it resonates with people, and seems to be supported by some empirical evidence. So having or learning a word for a concept does seem to help us integrate it into our thinking and then more effectively communicate about that concept with other people. We might argue, going back to the 1984 thing, the book, those people would still be able to think about rebellion, but they would have a hard time organizing a coup if they don't have the language to communicate with one another. Right. So the next part here is my opinion here, and sort of the central thing that I want to share with you. Having hopefully convinced you that language is more than just a necessary evil. It's more than just some background medium or material through which we must wade to do our job. I hope I can get you on board with this opinion, right? So our job is language. We spend our working days saying things through the act of programming and refactoring. And I quite strongly believe that it doesn't just matter what we say, but also how we say it is vitally important. So as professionals who get paid a fair amount of money, I believe we ought to hold each other accountable for mastering the art of language and writing clearly. But I also actually want to go a little bit deeper and say that it's not just about putting something down in a file that won't make other people hate you when they read it later. So we've talked about this link between language and mind. And I also believe that spending the extra effort to find the right way to write a piece of code about, it's about more than just putting it down. It's also about figuring out for yourself in your own mind what the code is really trying to say. Right. That's sort of the thing that I wanted to get to. Let's see. So far, this stuff has been a bit airy-fairy, soft sciencey, and this all pretty much amounts to write clean code, which isn't exactly a radical message. So let's make it more interesting and talk about a specific way in which we can make in which we can use the nuances of language to our advantage. So I'd like to tell you about a concept called making invalid state unrepresentable. Now, just like how a natural language might lack a word for something, our code might be written in such a way that it lacks the ability to express something. And we can use this to our advantage to make certain bad things impossible to write. It's a little hard to understand in the abstract, so let's look at 3 concrete examples here. So we're going to look at something called tag types, look at non-empty, and we're going to look at closed sets and their cousin discriminated unions. First up is tag types. So we mentioned invalid state, right? What is that? So I have an example here of some code that can be put into an invalid state that we can fix by using something called tag types. There we go, some code. I hope everyone can sort of see, because it's going to be a little code heavy from this point onwards. We have a code sample here, 2 structs. They represent entities in our domain level for users and for posts. So we're doing some sort of a blogging site or something here. And then we have this function called remove, which we use to remove a user based on its ID. So can you see how we can put this thing into an invalid state? So we can call remove with a user ID, which is valid and correct. But because post ID is also of type string, we can also call this thing with a post ID, right? So yeah, a bit of an obvious issue, but it is one that we allow by the way that we wrote the code. So we could have maybe fixed it by having a better name for the function, better parameter label, whatever, right? But we can also dig a little deeper here, see what we can find out about how we can use language here, right? So another way to look at the problem is that we're using the same type, namely string, to represent the IDs of both users and posts. And by doing that, we're subconsciously signaling that these IDs are interchangeable, right? After all, any argument that accepts a user ID will also accept the post ID. So a different example here. There's a delay function that accepts a delay time of type double, which we assume to be seconds, but really nothing prevents us from passing a double value that represents milliseconds instead, right? So as you can see there, we have a double value. It's a standard delay time in milliseconds, and we can just pass that to a function that expects seconds because it's the same type, they're both double. So we can reformulate this problem as the differentiation between seconds and milliseconds only exists in the semantic level. By reading the words in the functions, we will hopefully see that the method is meant to deal with seconds and that the constant is meant to be used as if it is milliseconds. Now, if we want to make this more robust, though, we could elevate this differentiation to the type level. As a simple approach, we could just create distinct subclasses for each semantic concept, right? Like we could create a subclass of double for seconds and another subclass for milliseconds so that these types are not equivalent. But it's not always possible, right? In Swift, for example, which I'm using here, you can't subclass something like string or double because it's not a class. You can't subclass what's not a class. Some people will then use wrappers instead, where you basically wrap something like a double in a struct called seconds, and you provide accessors and stuff to make it nice to use. Also not a big fan of that necessarily. If you follow it dogmatically, you could pollute the namespace with a lot of types that you don't necessarily want, but it's going to depend on your situation. So we can refine the idea of making special types by introducing a new helper struct that lets us tag simple types as being specific to other types. Right, so this is where the tagged type solution comes in. The idea is from a site called Point Free, very cool site if you're interested in these kinds of things. And they also have a library that provides all this functionality in Swift for you. So what you'll see there is it's a struct. It's got two generic parameters, like two type parameters. One is just called tag, and it's not actually used in the body of the struct at all. All that is used for is to make a type that you tag with something on the type level distinct from a different type that wraps the same raw value. Right. So back to our users and posts, here's how we use it. Instead of using a raw string as an ID, we use a string that was tagged to the user or post type, as you can see there. So we changed ID from string to tagged with post of string. From a type system point of view, this means that ID has a unique type that is not interchangeable with normal strings, and it's not interchangeable with other tag types anymore. Then for ease of use, we can make a little type alias there. Just need to find my place in my notes. Oh yeah, so we can define a type alias that just makes it easier to use this thing. And then at the function where we actually use this thing, we can just refer to that type alias. Now, this gives us type safety in that you can't call this function with the wrong kind of ID anymore. And it also, just in terms of reading this code, it makes it very clear what this function expects, right? Then lastly, at the call site, let me just jump there. We're allowed to call the function with a valid user ID as we would expect. But if we try to pass a post ID, it simply won't compile because the type doesn't match. So what's happening here is the compiler now checks that our code is correct. And a bug that was previously possible has now become unrepresentable, which I think is cool. Then back to the seconds and milliseconds problem. So as you saw, we can use a type like a model type to tag something, but we can also create a special lightweight little tag like we're doing here with an empty enum. That's just idiomatic in Swift if you need an empty type. Typically, you just declare a little enum. And then we use them as the tags there. So we've created these tag types for seconds and milliseconds. We can update our function to accept seconds. We can update our constant to be in milliseconds. And now these are distinct types, right? So if we now try to call delay with something that's milliseconds, it just won't compile because it's the wrong type. Simple as that. yeah, that's tag types. I'm going to move on to a new example here. Another day, another kind of invalid state. So we have a function here. It's called increment. It accepts an array and an index, and all it does is it increments a value in the array at the given index. Now, there's a couple of ways we can get this into an invalid state, right? I'll only focus on an obvious one for now. What if we pass -1 to this thing? So whenever we pass an index to something that's going to use it on an array, we implicitly expect that index to be non-zero, right? Now, lots of programming languages provide special types for list indices that sort of solve this for us. And if you have that, that would probably be the best practice to just use that directly. But alternatively, what we could do here is we could use an unsigned number type to signify that this value is not supposed to be negative. So make a little change there. Our function signature now takes an unsigned int. And when we call it, if we try to pass -1, we'll just get a compiler error. It's an easy way to make this thing safe. Right. Little bit more of an interesting example here. Here's a function that computes the average of an array of numbers. How can we break this function? So as a hint, what would happen if we call this thing with an empty list? So in the function body, we're dividing by the count. So if the list is empty, we'll be dividing by 0. That basically means the average of an empty list is undefined, right? So maybe we can make it unrepresentable to call it with an empty list. But that's if we don't have a non-empty list anywhere in our normal languages, right? So let's try and define one. How do we define a non-empty list? So a non-empty list will be almost exactly like a normal list. The one exception being that it should never be empty, right? And the property that a non-empty list has, I think that's quite interesting, is it will always have at least a first element. We can call it the head. Whoops. Where are we? Did not mean to click on that. Right. It will always have a head, and then we can put the rest of the array in a tail, and the tail can be empty. That doesn't really matter anymore. So there we go. What we would now do if you're writing this code from scratch is you would conform that structure to all of the relevant interfaces or protocols to make it behave more like a real array or a real list or a real collection. Or what you would actually probably do in practice is you would find a library in your language that provides this functionality. And then you can just import that and use it. Cool. So let's change our code, our average function, to now use this non-empty of double. Right, we're assuming that it's safe to just use this list as a normal array. All that has been sorted for us. The interesting thing here is that when we call this, right, there's just no way to pass an empty list to this anymore. So in this example, where we're instantiating the list, right in this line, we have to provide the first element. There's no syntax for having an empty list anymore. That's cool, right? I mean, the bug literally doesn't make sense anymore. Right, that is non-empty. So on to the last bit here. We're going to talk about closed sets and discriminated unions. So the last way that I want to share to make invalid state unrepresentable, we're going to look at things and invalid states that are caused by accepting too wide a range of inputs, and how we can then tighten our definitions with closed sets and with discriminated unions. So here's an easy one. We have this struct called myDate. It has a property for the day of the month. It has a property for the weekday of the month, like Monday or Tuesday. And it has one for the month of the date, I guess the month of the year. So first off.
Sorry, Phlippie, I don't think you've changed yet.
Oh, sorry. How's that? Cool, thank you. So first off, just because it says in the comments that 0 means Monday, right? Nothing actually stops us from putting 10 in there, or 100, or 10 million, or -4, just for a laugh, right? But even if we're well-intentioned, we might accidentally get confused about what day of the week is first, right? For me, I might consider Monday to be the first day of the week, but you might consider it to be Sunday. So this is once again an issue where the convention sort of lives in the semantic level. It's not really codified in the type system or in any sort of way that we can check. So yeah, So it's easy to get stuff around with the way this is defined, but it's pretty easy to fix, honestly, using enums. Now, enums, we all know and love. This doesn't fix the issue that a day can, like day of the month can still be wrong. I'm not going to dive into that. I don't think we have time. But this gives us a nice syntax for saying, you know, like if we say weekdays of type weekday, monthly of type month, we get a much nicer syntax where we can only enter valid numbers into this thing, or valid weekdays and valid months into this thing now, right? Enums are quite powerful for this type of thing because they give us the language to define a set of values that only contain exactly the values that we consider to be valid. In terms of algebra, they're basically closed sets. And speaking of algebra, here's an interesting concept, right? Certain types, like classes and structs, are what we call AND types. This is going to be confusing to read because I'm going to use and or in the middle of sentences all the time. In this example, an instance of class C contains an int and it contains a string. Right? That's why it's an AND type. In terms of algebraic types, they're considered products. And that's because the total set of all values that C can have is every int multiplied by every string. You can have like 0 and the empty string, 0 and a, or 1 and the empty string, and so on. It's a product of all the values. So in algebraic type theory, you also get OR types. They're not supported in all programming languages, unfortunately, but you do get them in a few. Unlike structs and classes, an OR type lets you choose which of its members to store in an instance. So even if you only have normal enums, you might understand more or less where this is going. The possible values that you can represent with this enum on screen, with enum E, is every int or every string. It's not both, right? It's going to be all the ints plus all the strings. And because of this, they're called sum types. All right. So now we've learned the terminology for two different type operands, namely product and sum. And so we can now start thinking about using the correct ones to describe our code. But here's a simple request function that can succeed with a string payload, or it can fail with an error, right? So we have the request function, and we have our result type that tries to codify this idea that something can either be a string with some value or an error with some value. If you don't know Swift, the little question mark at the end means it's an optional value. So it can either be a string or null, for example. And what's interesting is the optional values are OR types or sum types. So the success property can either be a string or null, and the failure property can either be an error or null. So we're off to a good start, right? However, the containing type here of of result is a struct, which means it's an AND or a product type. So result can contain not just a success or a failure, but it can also contain a success and a failure, right? And it can also contain neither. Some of those combinations just don't make sense. So maybe result should have been a sum type instead. So let's update that. Here we've changed it to an enum, which is an OR type or a sum type. Now our result can only be in one of two states. It can only contain a success string or a failure, but not both and also not neither. In fact, Swift has a built-in type called result that is implemented a lot like this. It's just more generic. And that's because this is actually the correct way to represent this concept in code. A lot of functional languages also have something called an either type. Yeah. So, OR types. Once you understand it and you get used to it, it seems like such a fundamental feature that it's actually a bit baffling that it's not universally supported in all languages. I mean, it is quite literally like only having a multiplication operator and no plus symbol in the language that you're writing in. So on screen, here are some languages that I believe from our research support OR types in some shape or form. It's definitely more common in functional languages. And as you might imagine, the notion of algebraic types is more mathy than it is Java-y. So unfortunately, depending on your job, this might not be available to you. But I do hope that it helps you to know that this concept exists of plus and multiplication types, essentially. And it might influence your thoughts around code and software design. Cool. That's our time. So I'll just give a quick summary. What we talked about today is language seems to be very deeply linked to how we understand things, and the way we express concepts seems to matter. This extends to the code we write, and there are many possible nuances in how we code. So we should spare some effort to think about how we're expressing our programs. Now, much like natural languages lack the words to express certain concepts, we can design our code so that certain invalid states are not representable. We can use, for example, tag types to make things that are conceptually not equivalent, make them non-interchangeable on the type level. There are appropriate types that we can use to prevent us from passing negative numbers or empty lists where there shouldn't be negative numbers or empty lists. And we can use enums, and if we're lucky, we can use discriminated unions, which give us precise languages, or which gives us precise language to limit the values that our functions accept to only the valid cases. And we learned about plus and product types. All right, that is it from me. So if anyone has any questions, shoot.
You have one in person.
Nice.
Yeah, Phlippie, thanks for the great presentation, really interesting. My question is more at a high level than raw code, writing your code itself. From like, if you're trying to use that sort of same concept when doing domain modeling, one of the things I've tried to articulate is like there's many words in English that have multiple meanings, like service or client. And like, when are you talking about a client as in an API, or a client as a customer? Or are you talking about a service as in an endpoint, or are you talking about a service as a person? So it's, how would you apply that to get, like, say, for example, in the domain of AI, how do you tell in your software or your language that you're using when a human's doing a task or when an AI is doing a task?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There's a concept, I forget what it's called. It's something like ubiquitous language or something, which is, it's a practice that some software teams embrace, where they sort of sit down together and they decide what are the words going to be for the different things, right? So in your example, let's say like service, as in a service a company provides versus a service that you can call. Some of those might have synonyms where you can decide that you're not going to refer to something you can call as a service. You're rather going to refer to it as an endpoint, just to disambiguate it, right? But then that has to be, I think, a practice in the team to sit and say, okay, when we say service, this is exactly what we mean, and probably draw up a little glossary somewhere in Confluence or a README so that everyone is talking the same language. I'm not sure if that answers your question. I hope so.
Cool. Yeah, so spot on.
Spot on.
There's someone commented in the chat that there's a concept in domain-driven design, the ubiquitous language, and Eric Evans has a good book on it, apparently. I don't see any more questions. Anyone? You have a question?
Yeah, just I'm not sure if it's a silly question or if I missed the answer. So the tag types that you mentioned in the beginning, is that something available in other languages as well, or?
It's such a simple implementation, really. Let me just quickly go back. The question that no one asked me that I am dreading a little bit. Where is this now? Sorry, let me just find it. Okay, let me firstly show you tag type. That is the implementation. It's literally a struct with one line of body, right? It's very simple to write this in any language, as long as we're talking about certain kinds of languages, which is statically typed, strongly typed languages, usually stuff with generics and so on. So the question that I'm dreading is, hi, I'm a JavaScript developer. What do I do with all this info, right? My response to you is socks to sock. No, it's the thing is, like, we have this in statically strongly typed languages, we have a very strong concept of a type space. We don't have that to the same extent in all languages. And that means we do lose some of the safeguards. We don't have a compiler being able to check logic for us at compile time. But there are other phases in the verification process, right? Like compiler checking is very strong. It's very early on. It's like a very shift left approach to checking correctness. But there are other approaches, and the most obvious one is just writing a lot of tests.
Right. Thank you. I think I missed the slide, so yeah, it kind of answers my question.
Cool.
Cool. Any further questions? Cool. I think that wraps it up. Thanks, Phlippie.
Well, can I just say, Evolt, your avatar is so annoying. Every time I switch tabs, I think someone's asking a question.
My avatar?
Yeah, Evolt's
Oh,
avatar.
Evolt's. Yes.
Cool.
Cool. Thank you. So our next speaker is in person. So Christopher Brunson, he's going to be talking to us about testing using AI, generative AI. So I'll just change that to, okay, cool. You're sharing her. I just want to check, can you guys on Zoom see it? See the screen?
Yep.
I think they can see it.
Yeah, no, we just want to put it to run this through Zoom.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so Chris started in retail. I'm just going off the blurb I was given, so you guys can ask him about that later. But he pivoted to software engineering and has been doing a whole bunch of cool things. So yeah, looking forward to hearing a bit more about testing.
Wait, I'm circulating this.
Oh, I need to. Access. Sorry.
No problem.
Can you share screen?
Let me share. Yeah. Okay, cool. Okay. Just hide this. Cool. Yeah. Why it sucks to be a JavaScript developer. Oh, sorry, wrong slide. The art of software developer testing and using generative AI. Okay. Bit of an introduction, what you're expecting from this talk. Discover how generative AI can help you create more effective developer tests, reducing manual effort with improving test coverage. Yeah, I do agree. Learn strategies for optimizing your testing approach and avoid common pitfalls in software development. I'm just going to run through the who am I, adopt a tester mindset, testing approaches in AI, pitfalls and my opinions, questions and references and more learning. This talk is about my opinions and my experience. So it's, don't take it as the gospel truth. Have an open mindset on this, please. Bio. I asked ChatGPT to write my bio through my LinkedIn profile through it. And I had to then say, okay, thank you. Can you give me a single paragraph because it was longer than my LinkedIn profile, all right? Then I said, thank you for the retail journey. I don't need to mention my customer-centric approach, just more that it's interesting. Okay, So there you go. This is what it did. Anyway, so seasoned software engineer, worked in e-commerce, fintech, and mobile messaging aggregators. I'm passionate about software testing. I love automating manual processes to improve cost center operations. Played a key role in migrations, streamlined development workflows, and refactored systems for efficiency and scalabilities. And I had 15 years in retail. I've always wanted to be a software engineer. I got a computer for my Christmas, for Christmas one year, and I just fell in love with it. Yeah, there's a photo of me. It's the only tie I own. That was my, yeah, sure. Cool. Understand you. I'm gonna stand. Yeah. Very agile. Cool. There you go. That's enough about me. All right. So my development setup. I use ChatGPT, JetBrains IDE, JetBrains AI Assistant, and I used to use GitHub Copilot. I switched away from Copilot because as an experiment to kind of see what's the difference between JetBrains and Copilot, I just love the domain awareness of JetBrains, and it just works for me. Copilot, it works for others. I will say it depends on your tooling and what you're actually trying to do. And it really does feel like I don't herd digital sheep, I herd digital cats. Dr. Tester Mindset, image from Bing, image creator. So build quality and care into your test just like your production code. Testing does not improve quality. That is through design decisions. That was a tough one to swallow, to realize that actually testing does not improve your quality. Refine knowledge for testing with examples. So use concrete examples to specify the expected behavior. I mean, the previous talk was really, really great, and I think it's a great run-up to this talk as well. As developers, we don't have the same context as QA. That has burnt me so many times in my life, that I write something, and then 3 months down the line, the QA comes running to me and says, but you didn't cater for this. And I said, but nobody told me about this. User stories to define the scenarios to test. And there we go. So correctness versus robustness. Correctness through positive test cases. There we go. It's quite easy to remember. Robustness through negative test cases. But get QA to add the negative test cases because they have a lot of that context on those unhappy stories. Keep it clean. Minimize duplication and dependencies. It's easier said than done, especially in your testing. And make sure, because you need to make sure your test methods are independent of other tests. That's also not easy to do. Ensure tests can always run in isolation. I mean, these things are all just really, it's just a different viewpoint of the same thing about keeping your test clean. And every test must have a clear purpose. That's something that I always struggled with in the beginning when I was starting to write tests, is my test didn't really have a clear purpose. I just throw the kitchen sink in there and expect to be trying to make a cup of coffee. And keep test logic outside of production code. If I have to explain this, I don't know. I'm just not going to explain this. I've seen it happen just too many times. You run that method and that somebody put into the code 6 or 7 years ago, and it just destroys everything, and you don't understand why, because that was actually some sort of test code that the developer forgot to take out. The language, understand tester language. SAT, software under test. End-to-end testing, I call it clicky testing because that's you just automating the user. Integration testing, it's when the components are working together. And unit test, it's your smallest behavioral test. Tester mindset mantra. Test early, test often. Say it 3 times every day when you open up your IDE. Test automation pyramid. The test automation pyramid helps with bug catching efficiency because you want to prioritize catching bugs at the lower levels of the pyramid where we have a lot more tests because they are cheaper. As you go higher up towards production on the tip, it is expensive to fix those coding defects. End-to-end validation, ensure comprehensive testing to confirm proper system functionality. And that's why the pyramid is a great way to stack those things to get to that point. And then you have your resource optimization, just promotes effective allocation of resources for your testing. So breaking down the different layers, we have the end-to-end testing. It is actually also your most expensive layer to implement tests. That's what's narrower. So you want fewer layers up, fewer tests up there because you have a dependency on the UI. And why it's expensive is because you're going to need a lot of other products or services or even humans who are actually testing that. And use only closed box testing. known as black box testing, because you should test without any internal knowledge of what is actually in the code. Focus on the input. Don't have any biases of what you expect it to do. Your integration testing, it's your middleware testing. That's just to validate your communication between the different systems. Your API testing, your data integration testing to verify the smooth flow. And it's preferred to do the closed box testing approach because you still don't want to assume implementation here. Then you get to your unit testing. So it's the cheapest layer to implement tests. It's also the widest layer, broadest. That's where you got your granular testing. Because that's where you get your fast feedback loop, because it provides rapid feedback on the correctness of small code units. And it helps with early bug detection and facilitating continuous integration. And it promotes the use of using open box testing. I would probably say, I don't think you can actually unit test closed box at this level. Or if you are, perhaps rather treat it as an integration test. Yeah, you actually want your biases to influence you, because if you don't know what you're testing in a white box type of test environment, then you're going to have no confidence. So your test automation pyramid, your 3 stacks there, it's just the automation makes tests easy to run, because that's the purpose, is you want to automate this whole process, because you want anyone to do through actions, and actions are being like through, whether it be a PR or somebody clicking a button, somebody running a Docker instance locally. Anything through actions should be able to run this whole test automation pyramid. You want to run it anywhere, so whether it be on a server or on a local machine, and on any device through flexibility. That includes even mobile devices, because you want to reduce your dependency on specific environments, because so that way you can allow teams to build robust testing frameworks that are adaptable, portable, and resilient to changes. And it's all should be all part of your software development lifecycle. So just covering quickly the XUnit 4-phase test method. It's a common structure, supports various languages and frameworks. Just about every single framework I've worked on, across multiple languages, has got XUnit, inspired type of testing framework, and it's created in the late 1990s by Kent Beck, the extreme programming guy. And it's really a combination of from the 60s, 70s, 80s to 90s about how software had started to evolve, and all those type of influences lead to this. So just a quick breakdown. You have your creation or your setup step. So you prepare your test environment. Do not have a dependency on other tests running first, in sequence or at all, to prime the environment. Also, it's just one of those things that it's easier said than done. I've had that too many times happen to me, where I've written a test that required me to run things in a certain sequence, and then I forget about that, and I can't understand why my whole test suite is failing. And yeah, that's why just ensure that you can run this in isolation. You have your execution phase, so the execution of your SUT, execute the specific functionality or behavior being tested. That's about the clear intentions. And your method name should, as I say, should have clear intentions of what you're testing. I also, once again, have learned the hard way of not being very clear, and 3-4 years down the line, even 10 years down the line, looking at the code, I'm like, I have no idea what I'm testing here. And this is actually quite an interesting one for me when I was looking into this with the validation, because in the validation phase, you should maximize verifying the data with the front door technique, which is using your API. Minimize using the back door, which is trying to query the database directly, checking log files or lock files, calling other things, that's actually outside of your API. So you kind of like think of it more as like the closed box approach here. And then you have your teardown, which is just you want to release all the resources that you've created and spun up for your test, and leave nothing behind except your footprints in your testing report. And also just reiterating what I said about the setup, just in the reverse, about you don't want it to leave anything behind that is required, that other tests are assuming are going to be there for it. Great. So yes, testing approaches and AI, outsourcing your testing work. That's really what AI is for me. BDD in 3 words, given, when, then. Okay, great. So the 3 amigos in BDD, 3 amigo BDD in 3 seconds. Even if you don't use BDD, it is the perfect way to capture the user story in a ubiquitous way to verify with the 3 amigos. Ubiquitous is also from BDD and not just DDDD. So we have the business analyst, product owner, the tester, QA, and then we have the developer, always the short guy. Let me introduce the 4th amigo approach to BDD. Use generative AI to become the 4th amigo. He's my favorite amigo. Also pretty much a short guy. Great. So let me demo this. I'm not going to do any live demos. And this is actually one of the pain points I will be mentioning at the end of this about my opinions. So yes, I'm using ChatGPT. We are writing BDD user stories. Our 3 amigos have come up with the following 3 user stories. You are our BDD story writing expert, our 4th amigo. Always prime the environment. I mean, you've got to make ChatGPT or whatever your AI is really feel special. So here we go. We just got the standard login. The unauthorized user attempting to sign in with wrong credentials. So also, then the next one is the unauthorized user signing in with correct credentials, getting redirected to the dashboard. And then the third one is just the authorized user who's now on the dashboard, just sign out. A very, very nice BDD story to always start off with. And it's probably how I've always, this is how I got into BDD, was with a user story like this. It just took me a very long time to write it. So this is what I love about ChatGPT. Voila. This is within a few seconds. And here we got the first story. So it actually tags it there correctly or decorates it with a feature, user authentication. I never used to do that. And I love this. So it explains everything there, and it gives me the scenario and the given, when, and. And this is great to slap into your tickets because even if you're not going to be using BDD, somebody else might use it later on. And here we got the second story, the successful login and redirect to user dashboard. Everything's just filled in there. I do have a talk on BDD, and I will actually extend that talk to cover this as well. And then we have the logout from user dashboard, redirect to sign-in page. And we've got that story there. That's just really nice. That this is written in seconds and not, I mean, I kid you not when you say these things can sometimes take an hour or 2 when you're sitting down and you're not doing this day in, day out, or it's your first time. And yeah, let's have some fun. You're writing BDD user stories, okay? So we've done it, but write for reading age 4 in tone of Bluey. So reading age is a great concept in prompting because a reading age also determines your audience. A reading age of 6 is what a tabloid newspaper has. And then a reading age of 8 could actually be for adults. And then even like a reading age of 10 would be what's some magazines, like doctors' journals would sometimes be as low as 10. So you get 10, 12. It's a very, very interesting thing. You get some amazing responses based off of this. So when you're sending out emails, do that reading age thing. Like the less important the person is, do the lower age. The more important you want to sound or more intelligent you want to sound, do it a bit higher. Okay, cool. So here we got Bluey. It's telling us the story. As Bluey, the happy user, I want to say, see you later to the dashboard so that I can go back to the sign-in page. This is great fun. I mean, I can imagine like doing software development, teaching kids and using Bluey GPT over here to actually write the BDD stories. I mean, that's an absolute seller. I mean, you could do whatever you want to, but I just really love this BDD story over here. Great. Test-driven development with AI. Red-green refactor. Never trust a test you have never seen fail. Okay, so TDD, purpose to grow code with test. TDD is not a testing technique. We were taught wrong. It doesn't tell us how to test. TDD is a design construction technique. And that is what they were always trying to say, but nobody got to the second page. TDD enables developers to make changes to the code base with confidence, and it gives us that immediate feedback loop. The 4 laws of TDD. So we got the do not write any production code unless it's to make a failing unit test pass. Then we go to the red, which is number 2. Do not write any more of a unit test than is sufficient to fail. Build failures of failures. That's a nice, easy one there, all the DevOps guys. Number 3, which is your green. Do not write any more production code sufficient to pass the one failing unit test. And then we go back to refactor. The 4th one is don't confuse unit testing as TDD. It is written before the code, not after the code. So as much as what I love TDD, I can honestly say that in all the decades I've been writing code, I've very, very seldom done TDD according to this. Most of my stuff has just been unit testing. So let's do TDD with AI Assistant. So write a unit test to test the signed value balance passed in the class bank account constructor is the opening balance of the account. That made no sense when I reread this. But this is what I really do enjoy about using AI Assistant, is you can actually put some garbage in there and hopefully you don't get too much garbage out. No code has been written. This is proper TDD. Right. So here we've got the response, and here I've got the unit test with a great explanation. This is the AI assistant in JetBrains. So this is not GPT anymore. You will see on these slides I indicate with the pictures at the bottom what I'm busy using. And so here we're using in Python, it's decided to use unit test, and we got the from and everything. And there's a great little, our first little test to test the bank account with the initial balance. And so there we go. And now I run the test and it's going to fail. This is in JetBrains in PyCharm. So what is great, right at the bottom, is this error traceback. There's, @explain with AI. It's the, you click on that and it'll open a window to give you an explanation of the error and suggest a fix. So the AI assistant pops up. Here it says, I've analyzed the problem, goes into all the details, explains everything there. It says the solution is simple and it involves only modifications to the code. And there we go. And now it's given me the bank account class with actually how to pass the test. There we go. I actually copy that over and I run and it passed. And that is proper TDD. Decision and condition coverage, if, else, and, or. Okay. Decision coverage testing. This is testing every possible outcome of a decision point, true or false, in your code, also known as branch coverage. The goal is to make sure that every possible branch is taken at least once during testing. That's where your coverage reports come from. And it's just to ensure that every decision is being validated. That's your if statements, your while loops, all these type of things. There's a lovely little mermaid graph that actually ChatGPT generated for me. Here we go. I don't know if you're familiar with this, is a really difficult language called PHP. Write a decision coverage for my function. I just wanted to see, if it actually knew how to test this. So yeah, we just got the if, else, if. So that's the code, which is actually where this mermaid comes from. Right. So just basic. Yeah, it's given me a solution. I didn't tell it what to use, so it gave me PHP unit. So it assumed I was using Composer. So it says sure with confidence and gives me the test. And at the bottom, it just explains what these tests will do and the decisions that it'll actually test. Sorry, one of the things that as you said, I write a decision coverage for my function. That was very, very important to actually be very explicit and clear and to use the least amount of words to kind of describe what you want, because you don't want to confuse it about what type of test you're asking for. Yeah, cyclomatic complexity. Yeah. And there we run it and it is actually passed. Then we get the condition coverage. So previous was decision, we got the condition coverage, and this is your and your ors that we want to evaluate the true and the false. This is to ensure all logic pass through the program are executed. So here we got a basic one, which is student and purchase amount greater than 100. 20% discount if true, no discount if false. So we got a bit of a rinse and repeat here. We still got the very minimal prompt, write a condition coverage test for my function. yeah, we've got the code for that. And there we go. So we've got the test that is actually given out there, and then it's given us a summary at the bottom. It says, in these tests, you test the possible decision. It's weird it says decisions, because not condition. And I run it, and it passed. And this is just really simplifying a lot of these tests that take a long time to write, and a lot of the tests that you don't think about writing, because one of the things, our time is valuable, and these are things that don't take long to write. We're talking about minutes. We're talking coffee cup tasks. Then we got the condition coverage hack. So to test every condition can be counterproductive, and it's not always required to meet minimal testing requirements. I came across this particular type of topic while doing a testing course, and in the course they were talking about requirements for like aviation and that in America, and I was surprised at actually how minimal the testing coverage needs to be if it's done correctly. And this is one of the shortcuts that they take. So for correctness tests, you want to test all the condition variants. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4 variables. So we're testing it so that we can get it true. Then for robustness, we only have to fail one condition. Also, this was a hard pill to swallow. This goes against everything I've learned. I've always previously just failed everything, or I've done multiples of this. I mean, the amount of variance on this, true and false, what's that for? So 2 to the power, what's that, like 8 or 16 tests? I can't remember. That's all you need to do, just 2 tests, and then you got confidence. So we come to domain and combinatorial testing, which feeds in from that one. So in domain closure testing, we're doing the input domain coverage, is having enough test cases to test the domains of each input variable. Problem is the boundaries, not the values in the range. This is where from my experiences, I would always focus a lot of the values in the range. So in the first one, which is greater than equal than 0 or and less than 34, I would test 0 to 33, and then I'd test 34 onwards. As in the testing community, people say that, oh, that's chicken counting, 1 too many. So you have open-sided boundary, which is you're greater than or equal to, and then you're less than. Or the inverse, you have your open boundary, which doesn't include the value, and then you have your closed boundary, which does include that value. So that's just your basic things. It's actually from, this comes from mathematics. I failed mathematics 011, so I'm not going to say much about this. So your boundary bug testing. Problem is in the boundaries, so I'm repeating myself. The best boundary bug is boundary plus delta or minus delta. So in the first one, the boundary bug would be -1 for that greater than or equal to 0. And then we got 34 because the boundary is actually 34, not 35. And the second one, we do the same. We say it's actually 49 and 61 because that's the edge of the boundary. Sorry, outside of the boundary, on the open boundary, we can use no, and the closed boundary would just be 79 and then 101 because we're doing between 80 and 100, which will include the values 80 and 100. And this is coming back to this. This is why this hack works, because in the correctness test, we are testing on only the boundaries. As you see, those values are actually all boundary values. And then the test then we're only testing a single boundary bug, because in this one here, I did a is equal to 1, which was actually the boundary bug. So keep that in mind if you ever want to do this shortcut test, is do the boundary bug approach. Yeah, testing the seams. That's actually quite nice. I like that one. Sounds better than boundary bug. So let's do a domain closure bug testing. Write a domain closure test for the following boundary. Yeah, we got somebody that's failed. Apparently -1 doesn't count as a score at school. You're guaranteed at least a 0. So there we go. Cool. So we feed it in here, and here I've got the test. It says dev test fail. It's using asserts because I didn't indicate what I actually was going to use for testing. And it actually explains everything there. And as you can see there, now it's giving some great boundary tests. So it's got assert not failed -1, so it's doing a boundary bug, failed on score below boundary. Then we got the assert fail. This is also one of those things in languages that feels so negative reading this. It's really hard to actually understand what this does without running it. And so you're testing a happy boundary on the failed 0, and then again we're doing a boundary bug on the 34, and then we're doing a happy failed on the 33. Don't think anybody was happy to fail. Great. And so here we go. Copy this all over, and I run it and it passes. So yeah, then we get domain analysis, which is your range coverage in your output domain. It requires us to test each possible boundary. And this is really where that whole boundary testing really comes in, is when you got something like this. This is a great one, the ACT and the GPA score one, because you've got your X and your Y over here. And we will need to test 8 boundaries and then 8 outside boundary. So that's actually quite a lot of tests. That's 16 tests in total. Right? And yeah, so write a domain analysis test on the following input domain statement. I've got everything just in one conditional statement. I know this is not exactly very dry, but for the purpose of this just shows, because I write a lot of code like this. It passes. Then here we got the tests. So also, once again, I didn't say what test framework to use, so it's just using assert, which is actually not that bad for unit test level. So yeah, we're busy running it, and you can see testing lower boundaries, it's giving me 4 tests over there. Testing upper boundaries, it's giving me 4 tests over there. I can just quickly eyeball that. That looks really, really good. I'm happy to push that out into a PR. Let me first just run to make sure it passes. Okay, well, and I said, thank you, but let's add tests for boundary input range. The input range, which is your input domain, is the gray area. This was actually only on the outsides, or the seams. Kind of going to steal that one. So yeah, you can see now it's kind of added 4 more tests to actually include the input domain. So now we got that really, really good coverage. So that's especially when somebody comes up to you and is still not confident that you're covering enough edge cases. So this is a great way just to add more confidence. It doesn't cost you anything more than just a few extra words in your prompt. And there we go. We run it and it passed for very, very little effort. Yep. And domain analysis hack. So, range coverage in output domains can be simplified by testing each boundary in isolation. This is actually great. So just test like the x-axis on here, and just test the y-axis. You're just cutting out all of those tests. That's also just a great way to also test. Take shortcuts in your testing. So we got combinatorial testing, and I think this is where it gets really hairy and scary, and this is where a lot of the problems creep in. So you're testing combinations of input parameters to detect faults that occur in their intersections. Useful where many factors can influence the behavior. And here they use examples about user inputs, configuration systems, system states. Yeah. So the coverage models are pairwise testing, T-way testing, and higher order combinations. Pairwise testing, it's just the intersection of just 2 variables and all the possible pairs you can get from that. Then your T-way testing is just now you're doing 3 parameters or more. So you're going to have far more combinations, and you're going to have your higher order combinations, which is all combinations of more than 2 parameters, providing more thorough coverage at the cost of more unit tests. So if you were to have, yes, actually I have done that, and it worked really well. That was actually the TDD part. So if you were to have like 8 Boolean values, your higher order combination tests would be 255, 56. If there was 16 of those, that's 65,536. So yeah. So yeah, we got the advantages of this type of testing approach is your efficiency. I don't know why they say efficiency, because if you're going to write, every possible combination, it is really not efficient. But you're focusing on key combinations, and it can provide significant coverage. And actually, funny enough, fewer test cases, as you will see now, compared to exhaustive testing. Even though this does sound like exhaustive testing, you've got your fault detection and your reduced complexity. instead of testing all combinations, which can be impractical, combinatorial testing actually reduces the testing effort, which contradicts the introduction to this topic. So let me demonstrate this. This is like a normal type of testing situation that I want to try and test, where I've got 3 different parameters and they have different values, and you're going to have then different combinations. I have a Boolean at the top enabled, so it's a true or false. I have a choice type, which is 1, 2, or 3. To simplify this, I'm just keeping it so simple. And I have a category A, B, C, D, could be higher, and I could have more. So if I consider all of these parameters, that would result in 24 tests if I actually had to do each type of pair testing. So pairwise testing can reduce this. And what you actually do is you take the product of the 2 largest sets, and that actually gives you a target, which in this case would be 12. So 12 being the target is, if you're going to get more than 12 tests out of what I'm going to show you next, then just revisit it again. But you want to kind of go less than 12. Some people will say, actually, it's the product of your 2 largest tests plus 1 for each parameter. Use whatever is going to build confidence. And I think it really comes down to the system that you're going to be working on. If it's a financial system, sure, add some extra tests. And if it's a medical system, sorry, yeah, I understand that's a very complicated industry. There we go. So here we go. And now I'm saying you're a senior QA tester and have been asked to generate a markdown table using pairwise. I'm in GPT now, ChatGPT. Consider the parameters below. This is the markdown from that table. That table was actually generated with markdown. And then I'm saying you need to write pairwise tests for the above parameters to reduce the number of tests. And I say output will be markdown table because I want to use this for documentation and then also to be able to use it again. And rows will include each combination as per pairwise. I did find I had to tweak this one a bit. So you might have to play around a little bit. This is herding cats right now. Cool, here we go. And I don't know how many times it took me to get to this one, but I eventually got it and I was really happy. And I will say, running this multiple times, I do get different test case results. But I do always get between 6 and 10, and that's across different, like, would it be an AI assistant or ChatGPT, but it was enough coverage for me to feel happy. So there we go. And now you can slap this into your documentation. You can give it to your QA person if you're not going to be writing the tests, or you can use this to generate your tests now. So 6 test cases from 24. That's nice. Great. And Yaron saying, cool, now write the following pairwise test. So I'm not, and Yaron say, use unit test class. My code, and I'd say we're going to do pairwise testing, and the attributes in the class correspond. I realized that was one of the things that was a bit of a trick. If I didn't actually say what attributes, it would actually get confused by the table. So you've got to be very explicit. And also, once again, communication. And so there's the code. There we go. And there's my test cases, all 6 of them. And that's really, really nice. So it's reduced that. You can tell it to say use like PyTest or something else, which can reduce it even more. But depending on what you're actually trying to do, I personally have a preference towards a more verbose, declarative style of writing tests, because I think about the next traveler. You know, you don't want code, you don't want tests that people have to delete because they don't understand what it's doing. And then we run it, and all the tests pass. And it was very, very little effort to cover all of that. Cool. So closing, generative AI, pitfalls and my opinions. My opinions do contain nuts. You need knowledge to determine hallucination level. And it's really snake handling generative AI in responses. If you lack the fundamentals expressing responses, there can be no confidence in the test code it generates. And this is why we're building up this presentation. I had to cover all of those fundamentals, had to just really dive in and see what are these things that I'm personally missing out? Why am I getting these type of responses? And I've dismissed too many things in the past that it was because I just didn't have the knowledge about what was being presented to me. And version control your responses along with the prompts. So I ran the same prompts multiple times with different results. I mean, it's the nature of it. And I had generated, well, the reason why I didn't do this as a live thing is because preparing this, I generate this and the test pass and everything like that. And then when I tried to do a dry run of this last week, it was giving me broken tests that I couldn't even run. So also just version control your responses, not just your prompts. And I was told that sure, you can reset the seed of the LLM, but I don't have access to generative AI to all the generative AI seed config settings. And here's another great one. Responses can be poisoned by poor quality code being used for training. I mean, you think like those really downvoted Stack Overflow things are terrible. Wait until you start getting responses like this. So coming from the mobile industry, where we worked a lot with mobile detection on cell numbers, which is what an MS is, that's what that MSISN, sorry, DN means. And so here we have something which is like, because I'm prompting for a local solution, which is it's a fairly narrow problem. So it is really influenced by the strength of the local community. So, well, this is a South African problem. So I was hoping to get a much better answer. I've seen some really bad answers. This one actually beats the cake. So here we can see telecom has now been allocated from 81 to 84. Here's the problem with this entire code. This might have been, okay, so first of all, okay, these things were wrong, but in 2014, we used to write code like this. Probably also with a lot of these mistakes. But because of number portability, this entire code is useless because you can port any number to any network. So you can't actually do this. So that is actually the problem. This is probably code from about, this code could have probably come from about 2015. So that is also the other thing. Especially when you, as I say, so just be wary of that. So the more general the problem is and the wider the contributors towards your problem are going to be, there'll be more trust. But as I say, the smaller, so if you're doing something really niche, you can run into this problem. And it's not just limited to our local developers. And here's another one. You need to reimagine your traditional design constructs like TDD and accept that AI responses will often contain that passing code with a test. So what I was trying to actually try and say here is that this has changed how I treat things. I can't see myself ever doing TDD again. I will claim I've done it, but it's just so that this was far quicker to do than to actually go through the whole process. And I said, I want a test function that calculates the product of two numbers. I want 3 tests. That was so much easier to write. And copy and paste, run test, it passes. No, I did trust it. That's easy to fail. You just change the return A plus B to add 1. Yeah, that's right. It is more about design. And more of my opinions. Apply different testing strategies to what you are testing. Don't just use one approach. And I think that's one thing that I've also been always looking into. How can I actually use new approaches to testing? And because AI is changing the testing landscape, and I'm a big proponent of BDD, and I'm very excited about how AI is going to actually push that. That's my opinion. And then use generative AI at all levels of your test development process, from writing to, the user story, that's what the BDD, refining your test definitions. I mean, that's a great way to actually do that, because you can summarize that and you can just go back to your stakeholders and say, is this actually the definition for the testing, to the generated code? And you want to add more value to your projects with less effort. So there we go. And also, like, yeah, I'll put the memo graphs of your code. That's a great way to do a paper trail of actually, did you actually do proper coverage? Go through those branches on paper. And also capture your project design decisions in documents for AI to use them. This is something I actually came across last week. I did an ADR on a project I'm busy working on, architectural design record, decision record. It had to do with messaging workers, and I put it in a document folder. And then I happened to ask my JetBrains AI a question about the project, because it's actually a greenfields project, so we're just still in the design phase, and it actually consumed my document, and that was actually great. So I was like, wow, okay, cool, use it like that. So you can actually train off your own documents. And some more opinions: use storytelling in your requirements to be used in your prompts, and apply the declarative code style. I like declarative coding. I think it's great, especially when you're getting into coding, because it makes it easier for you to read it and for people peer reviewing your code. And also generative AI, I feel, is more towards that side. And as I say, be a herder of cats. And not only prime the environment of what level of expertise, so be a herd of cats in your prompts. So you need to prime the environment of in your prompts. And you also need to tell it what is the testing solution that you're actually looking for, and also which frameworks and approaches. Else you will just get asserts when you actually mean to use a whole testing framework, or the reverse. And discover what works best for you. That's really the only advice I actually will be telling people. Everything else is just sharing my experiences, but just whatever works best for you. And think of best practices like a helpful ocean current guiding you towards your goals, and avoid getting caught up in, getting caught in the riptide, which can pull you away from where you want to be. That's what people often mistake best practices for, is that riptide, which just pulls you out and just tires you. Any questions? I might rope in some of the span people as well to answer if it's outside of the domain of my knowledge. So go ahead.
Yeah, no, you mentioned that you prefer using the JetBrains AI because it has more context of your workspace.
Yes.
More than Copilot. So just one question around that. So usually something that wastes quite a lot of time for me is when I'm maybe introducing something new and then it tends to break some tests. And it's not necessarily because what I'm introducing is wrong. It's just that I need to refactor some tests. Maybe I'm injecting some object to some other class, or the contract has changed. Do these tools sort of have the ability to refactor the test for you? Or is that like too much to ask for?
Oh, we've done wonderful talks on that. Well, yes, this is definitely one of the things the tooling can do. And I mean, JetBrains itself has a lot of that refactoring tooling built in. That's always been one of the strengths of the product. Just AI just can take it to another level. It can guide you on when you're busy refactoring, like how can you improve your refactoring. So not just from a testing level. But yes, so the other thing is, the reason why I also only just use the one AI in JetBrains is because they're nasty neighbors. They're like my children when they start bitching on a long drive. So the only one is allowed. So you can't use Copilot and AI. They won't work together. So because yeah, I mean, Copilot is great. I think for more on the codes, like code completion, like in the IDE. But I found the AI assistant was far better when I'm trying to interact with it. But I am actually busy refactoring 20-year-old PHP code. Sorry, I said that with shame. And it's actually great because I'm actually transforming that actually over to Python. So transforming the notes, take it from, this is written before PHP 5, and now I'm busy using it in Django Ninja. So I'm able to actually say, rewrite this crappy code in Django Ninja. And it's able to do that. Do you have another question? Yeah.
So you said just generate the mermaid graph, like a very simple question, but how do you actually do that?
So what I actually did was much easier than what I thought it would be. So I just said, I dumped some code into ChatGPT, and yeah, like when I'm busy just interacting with it, and I said, draw a mermaid graph for that code or for that function, and it immediately just gave me the draw mermaid markdown, and then you can go to mermaid live and you can paste it into there, because sometimes it would actually render it and sometimes it wouldn't inside the response. But it's a great tool. I can highly recommend you using that. Yeah. Sorry, Pierre wants to say something in the back. Yeah.
Chris, thank you for a really great talk. My question is, how important is it to ask ChatGPT for the type of test? You use some really fancy names for all kinds of testing. It's like a language. that you should know so that it knows the right kind of test to generate? Or
Yeah.
did you find it's important to say generate? I can't even remember the names that you use now, but
yeah, you do need to do that. And that's why I always wondered why QA testers still have a job. And I actually kind of realized that when I started to delve into that area, it's not that they don't share things with us. It's just so that there's a lot more to testing than what we are often, or what I was introduced to. You know, I was just introduced just to basic tests. I just knew about functional tests and unit tests. I didn't understand about this combinatorial test, testing on the domains, all these type of things. And it is a bit difficult because you got to do the research. You got to like figure out what am I testing. And ChatGPT doesn't always know how you should be testing. It's like the mathematical problem. It can't do maths.
I actually have a question as well. Because a lot of the like examples you gave is kind of like you know what you want. And so you're giving it code, but you know that like you kind of have faith that you've already written good code, or like you're expecting a specific thing and you know what you're looking for. And I feel like there is nuance there in terms of when you're using these kinds of things. Because you don't want someone to just like dump it in and take the test and like run them and like, cool, it's all covered now. Like, because the original code could have been buggy or yeah. What do you have to say about that?
I think the best recent video that I saw on that one was on Modern Software Engineering's channel. Dave Farley was talking about TDD as a broken process. It really speaks to me about that. And the broken process part of the TDD approach, which has influenced me a lot, is trying to write a test for the future and not for now. And that's why TDD is considered broken, because I don't have the context of where my code's going to be in a week's time or even in an hour's time. So that's why when you are herding cats, I mean, you really are, you don't think about the end goal. You think about where you are now, because it's all over the place, all around your feet. So yes, the tests that I'm writing today most likely will not be the tests that end up in the final merge request. So you just fine tune its iteration. You just rinse and repeat the whole time. The other thing is you can also just ask it and say, like, give me some examples of user stories. That's where the BDD is great, because the BDD is a great way for you to take that thought, you put it into a user story, a BDD story, and you can then take that BDD story and start using BDD testings, because then you can actually write all the unit tests in the background that actually consume that story. And that's a great way to get also over that mindset about what am I writing, what tests am I going to actually write? Because that's the hardest part for me always with testing, was writing that first test.
Cool. Any other questions? Online? Someone had questions, but then it was like the same as what was asked in person. Yes. Okay. If there are no more questions, we do still need to hand out JetBrains prizes.
Yeah. So I just thought to share this. So my presentation resources, I did this a course through Constructs. It's an 8-hour testing course. The first month is only $1. Second month is $35. So yeah, that 8 hours took like 40 hours to do. Also, a lot of great courses on there. The Modern Software Engineering book, I absolutely love it. For me, it's the best book I've ever read. And also, I love the YouTube channel. My next book is going to be XUnit, the granddaddy of this, the Bible. And yeah, just some things like, domain testing, boundary value, and just copious amounts of coffee. Yeah, I do drink about that amount. Those are 1 kilogram bags, by the way, not 250, not peeny-weeny little things. Cool. And there you go. Yes. No recruiters, please.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Cool. I did chat with Phlippie offline. I don't know if you want to, Phlippie, or...
No, I think you should do the honors. Thanks, Josh.
It was the first question was asked, so I believe that was you, Matthew. You asked Flippy's question, so that was from Flippy's side, and then now you have the difficult job of picking the other two. Good luck.
I rather liked your question, so yeah.
Cool, and then one more.
just randomly pick somebody. Doesn't work.
You can do that too. It's up to you.
Oh gosh, I don't know. Who can remember how many amigos there were in my story? Oh, okay.
Nice.
There we
Cool.
go. Wonderful.
Cool. So I'll chat with you. Oh goodness. Now we need to time it. Sorry, online people. Okay. Yeah, I think that about wraps us up for tonight. I'll get your guys' deets to get the prize to you. Thank you everyone online for joining. And yeah, thanks everyone for joining in person, and thanks Span again for hosting us. Yeah. Cool. Have a good evening further.
Please, yeah, feel free to stay around and mingle or have some more drinks, or there's a little bit of pizza left as well. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for attending.